Hello everyone. My name is Daichi, and I will give you a lecture regarding the radiation and remediation activities. So, let's start today's lecture. Today's theme is Restricted Areas, Past, Present, Future, Volume 2. Are you ready? Last time, I talked about the history and changes over time of the restricted areas, specifically, the establishment of the evacuation areas, shortly after the accident of the nuclear power station, as well as their reorganization. And definition of the restricted areas was also covered.
Right. That was a really good review for me. Then, I suppose, that this time further changes over time of the restricted areas will be covered, after the reorganization of the evacuation areas to this date.
As explained in the previous lecture, reorganization of the evacuation areas had been completed in August 2013, and after that, decontamination activities, as well as construction of necessary infrastructures had been sequentially implemented. During around 6.5 years, evacuation orders in the habitation restricted areas, the preparation areas for lift of evacuation order, and the specific spots recommended for evacuation, had been lifted in a step-by-step manner, to the date of March 4, 2020, when the evacuation order in the preparation areas for lift of evacuation order in Futaba town was lifted.
Yes, I see that only the restricted areas in red are still remaining now. Does it mean that in the restricted areas, the evacuation orders have so far not been lifted at all?
Actually, no. Before that, there were some major roads, in terms of radiation protection, where only so-called through traffic had been allowed, that is, for people just to drive through the roads, without getting off from their cars. At the time, in a quite small part of the restricted areas, evacuation orders were lifted. Specifically, by March 10, 2020, in conjunction with resumption of the entire JR Joban Line, evacuation orders were lifted for the stations of the JR Joban Line, as well as the roads around the stations, in the restricted areas, in Akuma, Futaba, and Tomioka town.
I think that it is really good that evacuation orders were lifted, but do you mean that they were lifted only in very small part of the areas, only for some stations and their surrounding areas?
At the time, simultaneously, institutional arrangement for the restricted areas were reviewed, and the new areas, named the specified Reconstruction and Revitalization base areas were established. Let me explain the area in the following parts.
The specified Reconstruction and Revitalization base areas. It is a very long name, and I have heard the name for the first time. Could you tell me specifically what the areas are?
Well, to make the long story short, the specified Reconstruction and Revitalization base areas are the habitable areas in the restricted areas, after the lift of evacuation orders. Of the 7 municipalities, which included the restricted areas, they were constructed in Futaba town, Akuma town, Nami town, Tomioka town, Itat village, and Katsureo village. Specifically, each municipality makes the plan, and if it is endorsed by the Prime Minister, decontamination activities and construction of infrastructures are implemented in a concentrated manner, for preparation for return of people. However, there are some conditions for the endorsement of the plan. For example, reduction of dose rate by decontamination activities, to the level below the criterion, which is low enough for the lift of evacuation orders, within around 5 years. Landform appropriate for habitation of people and economic activities, preparation of access to outside the restricted areas, size of areas, in which effective construction of the areas is possible, and so on. Summary of the specified Reconstruction and Revitalization base areas, which were constructed in 6 municipalities, including approval date of the plan, is represented in this table. The plans were approved between September 2017 and May 2018, and constructions in each municipality started between December 2017 and November 2018. Size of the areas ranged from around 95 hectares at the smallest in Katsureo village, to around 860 hectares at the largest in Akuma town.
I see. The constructions had already started in all of the specified reconstruction and revitalization base areas. By the way, do they still continue to date?
Actually, all of the constructions necessary for lift of the evacuation orders had been completed, and all of the evacuation orders in the specified reconstruction and revitalization base areas were already lifted. Let us go into detail for it. First of all, on June 12, 2022, in the Nouki district, Katsureo village, the evacuation order in the specified reconstruction and revitalization base areas, with the area of around 95 hectares was lifted. For the next, on June 30, 2022, in the areas including Shimonogami district, in Akuma town, where once the central part of town was located, such as the JR Ono station, the evacuation order in the specified reconstruction and revitalization base areas, with the area of around 860 hectares was lifted. In 2 months, on August 30, 2022, in the areas including around the JR Futaba station, in Futaba town, where its new town hall is located, the evacuation order in the specified reconstruction and revitalization base areas, with the area of around 555 hectares was lifted. After that, on March 31, 2023, in the 3 districts, that is, Murahara, Suinamori, and Tsushima district, which include Daujin no Moriabori, and Abori Sumayuki no Sato, in Nami town, the evacuation order in the specified reconstruction and revitalization base areas, with the area of in total around 661 hectares was lifted. On the next day, on April 1, 2023, in the Yonomori and Usuga districts, which include areas around the symbol of Tomioka town, lines of cherry blossoms along with roads in total 2 kilometers, in Tomioka town, the evacuation order of the specified reconstruction and revitalization base areas, with the area of in total around 390 hectares was lifted. And at last, on the next day, on May 1, 2023, in the Nagadoro district, in southern part of Itat village, the evacuation order in the specified reconstruction and revitalization base areas, with the area of around 186 hectares was lifted. And at the same time, the evacuation order in the areas, outside and adjacent to the base areas was also lifted, on the condition that nobody would live in the areas.
I can see in this table, that all of the evacuation orders, of the planned specified reconstruction and revitalization base areas were lifted. I can fully understand, that there was another significant progress for reconstruction, but the restricted areas are still remaining, right? What will happen to the remaining areas?
As you mentioned, the restricted areas are still remaining to this date. Basic policy for lift of evacuation orders for whole areas, as well as issues to be addressed, will be covered next time. So, let me wrap up my lecture by providing you the key points. This time, as a continuous work from the previous, changes over time after the reorganization of the evacuation areas to this date, were elaborated. By March 2020, all of the evacuation orders had been lifted, other than the restricted areas. And as for the restricted areas, although it is in a quite small part of the areas, by March 2020, evacuation orders for the rail stations, as well as the surrounding roads had been lifted, in conjunction with entire resumption of the JR Joban Line. After that, in the restricted areas, the specified reconstruction and revitalization base areas, which are habitable areas after the lift of evacuation orders, were newly established, and of the 7 municipalities, which include the restricted areas, the areas were constructed in Futaba Town, Akuma Town, Nami Town, Tomioka Town, Itat Village, and Katsureo Village, and all of the evacuation orders for the specified reconstruction and revitalization base areas had been lifted by May 1, 2023. The future issues and measures to be taken for the remaining restricted areas will be explained in the next lecture. Okay, today's lecture is now dismissed. See you next time. In this channel, the useful information regarding the radiation and remediation will be provided to you. If you like it, please subscribe to this channel, and do not forget to click the like button.